Hey everyone. So I hope we are live and thanks for joining in. And we have Abel here. So Abel is Auth0 Ambassador and been working with many communities and really interesting. This session, I'm really excited for this session. And yeah, thanks for joining in. And you can share with your friends that we are live, share with the communities because this is gonna help because most of the people don't know about the authentication and web security part of things. So if you want to get a grasp of things like how web security can help and how Auth0 especially can help with that part, this is the best place. And it will be a short session. You'll learn a lot of things in little time. And and Aviyel is hosting this session. So thanks for the Aviyel platform. And Aviyel is basically a community for open source projects where we are trying to join project maintainers and developer communities and content creators together so that we can help open source project to sustain. So this is the entire idea of Aviyel. And I hope you can explore the events we are having on Aviyel platform. And we have a lot of content, written blogs, which are of high quality. You can get started with some open source projects, contribute to open source and make open source a better place. So that's the whole vision of Aviyel. And thanks for tuning in. And in this session, Abel will go through the authentication with Auth0 using React. So you'll get hold of two things. One is React and one is authentication. So even if you are a front-end developer, even if you don't know anything about React, you can start with this one and you can get some resources through Abel. Later after this session, we can share some resources or anything like that. And so let's get started. Abel, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks everyone. Thanks Joshua, and thanks to the entire team for this opportunity. I'll quickly share my screen. I hope Joshua can bring it up on the stage, and then we should be good to go. All good? Okay, awesome. So, summarizing what the session is going to be all about, it's about how to integrate Auth0 with React. Nothing fancy. That's pretty much about what we're trying to do. Quick introduction about me is that I'm Abel Mathew. I recently graduated from United Orkla in this June 2021, so 3-4 months ago. And I'm a passionate open source and community enthusiast. So I have been part of various communities and I have been passionate about them. I am an Auth0 ambassador, Postman student expert, AngelX student ambassador, and I love to write content and present sessions. So that is what always interests me apart from writing code. Writing code is always fun, but presenting sessions, writing content is always something that gives me motivation. If you want to connect with me, you can connect me at that username. You can find me on almost all platforms using that username. If you don't find me, then hit me up on some other platform. I'll join that platform for you. So that's pretty much about me. And then that's about the slides. We'll get hands-on because that's what the best part is. So coming to Auth0, so I'll quickly open the website for you. I want to cover it as much hands-on as possible, and so that we can experiment with things and we can learn it in the way that you would be facing it. Because I don't want to show you a slide and you would be facing it in some other format because you are not able to comprehend what is happening. So very nicely, I have a blank folder. I'll open it with VS Code. You can use any of the platforms that you want to use as a text editor. I use it because that's what my preference is, but you can use any platform. So let us start with the usual. So we'll create a React app and give it a few seconds while the terminal is loading. It's unusually slow for me, but yeah, it's all good. So we do npx create React app. There was a poll, but I damaged the poll. But yeah, npx create React app. I'm calling the app as app. You can call it anything that you actually want. And then in the meantime, I'll wait for it to start loading, and then we can set up our Auth0 account in the meantime because we want to save on time and make the most of the time. Yes. So it's creating a new React tab. In the time that's happening, I go to auth0.com. I already have an account. If you do not have an account, click on sign up. It's a fairly simple process, but I'm clicking on login. auth0.com. That's it. No fancy URLs. So I go to auth0.com, wait for the login page to load, and then mine is using Google login. You can use any of the login providers that you want. And then we are here. Have any of you ever used Auth0 before? If you have, then show me in the comments so that show some love for Auth0 if you have actually used it. So within Auth0, there are a few technical terms that may be new if you're using Auth0 for the first time. So I will show you around. So within Auth0, every new project that you have is called as a tenant. It's called as a tenant. I will just quickly type it in the chat so that people do not missing or the technical term. So one second. It's called TENANT. So before starting a new project, you should always create a new tenant, because if you don't, then you will be overriding the users with some existing project. So let us say Aviyel. So let us say that I am calling this as my tenant domain. So tenant domain is the domain at which the folks will be logging in. So it is like the URL that will be visiting. You don't need to send this URL out to the people. Your application will be directly redirecting it over here. The region, you can choose any region that is close to you, but if you are worried about GDPR compliance or some internal laws and compliance laws that you have to adhere to at your respective locations, you can choose the location as required. This location is the location at which your users' data will be stored within Auth0. So I am choosing the default one, use, and environment tag is development, because development tag helps to make sure that we get the logs properly within development. But once you go to production, you can change it from the settings to production. So that's pretty much about it. We click create. And assuming that we know nothing about Auth0, the simple step to follow is we come to wait for it to load for a few seconds. In the meantime, we can check if React app is loaded. It is almost done, so we'll just wait. Folks, anyone has used Auth0 before? Any questions or anything? Feel free to put it in the chat. How many React developers over here? It's good to see that Aviyel is also developed on top of React. So one more project on React. React is essentially being used at almost all places. Auth0 comes with every time you create a new tenant, you get 22 days of free trial to experiment with all the features. But the free plan is sufficiently good enough for almost all projects. And for almost all projects that I have ever developed, I have rarely felt the need of going beyond a free plan. The free plan is generously good, and it covers almost all use cases, and you will rarely run into problems where the free plan is a blocker, unless you are a really scaled up project, at which point in time you would have to go for a paid plan. But the free plan is good for us. But for the first 22 days, you can try all the features, even the ones on the paid plan, to actually know if those features actually add value to your project. So as I said, for each project that you create a tenant. Okay. Now this application 0 are the different projects that I reframe myself. This application within Auth0 are different components of your project that are using authentication. So it's possible that you are having the same username, same user database that you're using for your front end and your API. And let's say you have got multiple front ends or multiple API servers, and you want to have the users share a common user database, and that is where this application comes. So if you create a new application, a front end app, you come over here. So let us say we are calling it dashboard. Let us say we are creating a dashboard which is a single page application like React. I choose this, I click on create. So now I can use the internal settings that are provided by Auth0 to connect my React application to Auth0 to use as authentication. The process is really simple. You don't have to remember anything. You come to this dashboard, click on quick start, and then click on the platform. We are using React, so we click on React. Assuming we don't know anything, we just follow the steps, copy paste, because that's the only thing that we have to do, because rest everything is provided out of the box. So in the meantime, let us see if our project is up. So I'm just doing yarn start so that our create React app is up. Sorry, this is the wrong folder. So yarn start. Yes, click start, and if things go well, because live demos are always frightening because you never know if things go wrong. Yes, so our project is up and running on localhost 3000. If something goes wrong, we'll fix it because fixing bugs in production is what we are experts in. And it's always really frightening, also giving a live demo. But yeah. Let us word. Yes. So quickly showing the code that is there for the folks who are starting off with React. So we have a fairly simple int.js which renders an app component, and the component is over here, which renders an image, text, and context. That's the only thing that this app is essentially doing. This is the app that comes out of possibly create React app. It's here that okay, let's put this up. So this is the only thing that is there. Nothing fancy, nothing else. So let us try to put Auth0 integration over here. So let us say that we are trying to build our application and try to add it. So I come over here, I scroll down. So the first thing that they have said is that configure the Auth0 provider component. So the way that Auth0 works is that we wrap our entire project wherever we want our login based identification. So essentially, you should ideally wrap your entire project in this Auth0 provider. So to start off, you need to install this Auth0 SDK. I always recommend installing it from here and not from npm because it's possible that the package name changes or something changes. You always want to make sure that you're using the official library and not some unofficial library because you never know when some security attacks happen. So, okay, since I'm using yarn, I don't want to move to npm. You can use npm or yarn anything. Since React under the hood comes pre-installed with yarn at this point in time, so I am using yarn. But you can use a yarn or npm. Both of them are equally good. No problems with that. No preferences, no recommendations because it's up to you how to do it. So once that is done, in the meantime that it is loading, you have to try to understand what is happening. So we are wrapping our entire app within an Auth0 provider. So the advantage of doing this is that our entire app will then be able to access the authentication state of the user. So the first thing that they have done is to wrap the entire project in the provider. So this was the code that we had to import Auth0 provider from Auth0 React. Once the package is installed, this will resolve. At this point, it will not resolve. We'll wait for the package to get installed, but I'm copying this. So if you notice that this code that you see over here is auto-filled for you with the domain that we had set up initially and the client ID. This client ID can be public. It's not meant to be secret. If you want, you can put it in an environment variable, but even if it's public, it's not causing adverse harm to your security. So you can directly put it. And the redirect URI. The redirect URI is the URL to which the users will come back after logging in. So when people click login, they will go to this domain URL that is there. They will do the login and come back to the redirect URL. We want people to come back to where they started. Hence, we put window.location.origin. If you want people to come back to, let's say, a dashboard or something else, you would put a /dashboard at the end. So I am wrapping this entire project in the Auth0 provider. So I do this and I do /Auth0 provider. And with that, we have our entire project wrapped within the Auth0 provider. And that is essentially the first and the major step we have to do to make sure that our entire app has got access to Auth0 authentication pipeline and all the remaining stuff that we want. So that pretty much covers everything else. Apart from it, rest everything is through this custom hook that is provided by Auth0. The way that this use Auth0 hook works is that it fetches the data from this provider. So if you're logged in on a page and you want to have the user data in some other page, it is able to fetch it directly because both of the pages are wrapped in the same provider. So once this package is installed, which is installed, so I'll just do, okay. Let us try to follow this step by step. So what all do we want? We want a login button. we want a logout button. And once people are logged in, we want to see some user details or info, pretty much of the basic things. So let us say that we come to our app.js and we want to add a login button. So we use import Auth0 from Auth0, essentially copy the same code, and we create. I'll quickly explain what is happening over here once I copy paste it. So let us say that we just want to return instead of the image, I'm deleting the paragraph and everything else. I'm deleting the header also. So our entire project will just be a login button. Classic example of live demo. So this login with redirect is provided from this use Auth0 custom hook. So this is a function which you can pass to the on-click function of the button, and it will essentially do the login for you. So that's the only thing that you have to do. Once you do that, your user is logged in and you can access it within your app. We'll see the next part of how to access it. The next step, once we see that this part is working, because incremental development is important. You don't want to code the entire thing and see if something breaks after doing the entire thing. Incremental development is a quick feedback. So we are over here. All we have done is that we have wrapped the entire component in the Auth0 provider, which provides authentication state to our entire project. And then we have created a button to which we can pass the login with the redirect component. And my build is essentially really slow, which is weird. But yeah, we'll wait. If any of you folks have got recommendation on how to increase this development build time, feel free to chime in. So you see a semicolon that is there. That semicolon is there because I put a semicolon over here. Small copy paste next to it. Yeah, semicolon is gone. I click on login, and redirect URI is not in the list of allowed callback URL. So something went wrong. So which is essentially very normal. So the first thing that I want to show you the features of Auth0 is that whenever something goes wrong or anything goes wrong, we have got a wonderful monitoring through which you can see anything that essentially went wrong. So if a client says that something went wrong in a login process and you want to know what essentially went wrong, you can come back to your monitoring, which covers your entire project's logs, and you can see the logs. So even if the client forgot to take a screenshot or somehow something went wrong, you can always come back over here and know what essentially went wrong. So this says that callback URL mismatch. Localhost 3000 is not in the list of allowed callback URLs. So what this is saying is that after logging in, a callback happens to a local URL, and Auth0 is saying that that is not in the list of allowed callback URLs. This is a security feature to make sure that no one else is going to use our project and trying to make people log in and pass data back to their application. So the way to fix it is that we come to application, we click on the application that we had chosen, which is dashboard, and we go to settings. So within settings, this application logo will be seen when we do login. You can customize it as per your requirement. Application name is also something which you can customize. So application login URI, you don't need to put that. Allowed callback URLs are the URLs to which people can come back after logging in. So we want people to come back to localhost 3000 after logging in. Recommendation and a suggestion for everyone is that you should remove this localhost URLs once you go into production, because anyone can spin up a product in localhost and try to run it locally. So you should have these localhost URLs only in development environment, and once you mark this to production, you should not have this localhost URLs. So allowed logout URLs are the URLs to which people can come back after logging out. So I'm putting the localhost URL in all the possible places, although it's not required in this fourth place, but putting it in the first three places is required to make sure that Auth0 is able to understand that the application is the application which is allowed to make these calls. So once we make these changes, no change to code is required if things go well. Once I click on login, voila, the login page comes. So this logo is the logo that you saw in this dashboard. So you want to customize, you can customize that. This dashboard is the name that you provided to your application that is using this user-based system. And this Aviyel demo Abel is the name of the tenant or the project that you created. So this is how the URL works. If you want to customize, that is how you essentially customize. If you want to add more social connections, you come over here. We come to, give me 1 second. Authentication, social. So you can add more social connections if required. By default, it comes with Google and username password. So you can create a connection and it works under the hood. So clicking on Google, because that is the easy way to do things. And it should work if things go well. The app will not show any data, but it should work if the login is a success. So this comes the first time. This authorized app comes the first time. So what this essentially is saying is that the user has logged into Auth0 to your domain, which is Aviyel demo abel.us.auth0.com, but it is requesting permission from you, the user, before sending the data back to the front end. So it is like a permission system to make sure that your front end gets only those data which the user consents to. So let us say that you wrote code which says that you want access to user's mail address, but the user comes over here and clicks decline, which gives the user the power to decline and choose what permissions to share. And that essentially is based on what the Auth0 standards are based on. So we click on accept because I'm okay with my front end having access to my profile data, and I'm logged in. But we still see the login button over here. But to make sure that we are logged in, if we go to the monitoring, we go to the logs. If the login was success, we see a successful login over here, which essentially means that the login was success. So how do we get the data back? So the way to get the data back is that we have got few more custom destructurable destructurable functions and objects within this custom hook. So there is one by the name user. If you are wondering how do I go, nothing to worry. We come over here, we come to application, we come to application. All of that is mentioned in this starter documentation that we have. So to make sure and to show that it's actually meant, we'll try to follow it step by step. Did my UI just click? Did I put the UI? This client ID that you see over here is essentially the same client ID that you had added to the web. So make sure that it matches, because that is how Auth0 is able to understand which app is your app. So there is also something known as a client secret. A client secret should not be exposed on the front end. Client secret is meant to be secret. Sorry for the small issue. So if you saw the small issue that we had of callback URLs not being in the allowed URLs, that is because we had skipped these steps because we were in too much hurry. But this is the steps that was recommended to be followed, which we essentially skipped. So these are the allowed URLs that we had to put in the settings. So we have put login component. We scroll down. We want to add a logout. We'll add logout a bit later, or else we can add right away as well. Let's just put it over here. So let us say we come over here, we have one button, we create one more button. Sorry, we pasted the wrong. Okay, we paste this. So we have got a log, but this logout is referring to a logout function, which is not defined. Where is the function defined? That function is part of the use Auth0 hook. So if we put this use, this function takes the return to URL. So let us say if your project is having a logout button on some internal pages like /dashboard/profile, but you want people to return to the home page. So you can, instead of having people return to the window.location.origin, which is the place where it started off, you can have them return to the home page as well if you want to. So that is something that you can customize, return to. So if you're customizing this return to, you should also be putting that in the list of allowed callback, allowed logout URLs, because if you don't put it over there, the logout will fail. So that's about logout. Let us also add this user component. So we also have got 3 more components, which is user, he is authenticated, he is loading. I'll explain how all the 3 works in just a moment. So we have got this component. I am just copy pasting this. Okay, my EX link and Prettier is doing some fancy work, but don't worry. I am going to Cool. So I just copy pasted the code. I'll explain how it is working. So collapsing this part, we have got a logout URL. That is essentially what this part does. Now coming to how this works, we have got a is authenticated. Yes, is authenticated. Okay, where is it loading? Good. I'll just copy paste this also. I'll explain all of it in just right. So is loading is true when Auth0 is trying to find out whether the user is logged in or logged out. So it does API calls silently under the hood to find out if the user is logged in or logged out. So is loading will be true when the API call is happening, when it is trying to figure out whether the user is logged in or logged out. After the is loading is false. After the is loading is false is when you should be trying to access the data of is authenticated. The data of is authenticated will be fresh, will be recommended to be used only when is loading is false. You should not be trying to access is loading. You should not be trying to access is authenticated when the loading is happening. So once the loading is failed, then this is authenticated will either have a true or false. It will be true if the user is logged in, false when the user is not logged in. And this user object is the object which will have the data of the user. So that's essentially about how things work. Nothing fancy, nothing else. Yeah, if is loading. Yeah. So over here you see that we are rendering a component which has got user.picture, user.name, user.name, and user.email. So if things go well, then this plugin should. So we have got all of this. We have got a login button, logout button, and it's showing all the rendered components. Let us try it all out once and for all. I click logout, it logged out. I click login. As mentioned, that there's the authorization screen that comes after Google sign-in happens only the first time. So since I'm doing the sign-in for the second time, that authorization screen that you saw after Google sign-in will not come. So if you saw for a moment the loading came, that is when Auth0 was trying to figure out whether the user is logged in or not. And once it's logged in, it's showing the user component. So if I click refresh, it's showing the loading when that internal API call is happening to make sure whether the user is logged in or logged out. So let us say that we want to show the login button only when the user is logged out and the logout button only when the user is logged in. So the way to do it is very simple. We use the is authenticated component over here. The code that I'm writing is not the cleanest code. Do not take it as a recommendation on how to write clean code, because this is not how you should be writing a clean code. But I'm just trying to showcase you how to get things done in a quick way for the demonstration purposes. So as we had discussed earlier, we want to check the is authenticated state when is loading is false. So the recommended practice is that you put that first and then do the second check, because it goes from left to right. So when is loading, when it is not loading and the user is authenticated, we want to show the logout button. So when it is not authenticated, we want to show the login button. So we put the same condition for the logout also. We come over here, I wrap this, and we want to show the opposite of this. Authenticated, we want to show the logout button. So if things go well, it could have one button at a given point time. So I'm logged in, I see the logout button, I click logout, I have the login button. So that's about the basics of how things work and everything. Now that's about the basics. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, or else I'll cover a few more things which essentially come in handy. Anyone has got any questions, for sure you want to add on something or anything else you want to cover until before we move on to the next part. Yes. Yeah. So one of the common mistakes which I have seen large companies, large institutions, large projects do is the fact that assuming the front end to be the source of security. So let us say that I have got an API which is supposed to be authenticated, but I'm not putting security on that, but I'm just putting security on the front end which is logged. So let us say that I've got a login page, and a login URL. So I probably would be putting a check on the front end for logging in, but not putting a check on the API side. So it is really important that your components that you have for your services are independently secure. Your services should not be depending on each other to have the security enabled, because your API should be independently secure, your front end should be independently secure. You should not be interdependent to have security enabled, because once you do that, you are introducing bugs. Because if your API is not independently secure, someone can make an API call through command line, through Postman, through any of the various API making platforms that we have. So that is one of the bigger mistakes that we always have. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So as always, it is said the security of the application is only as good as the humans that are using it. So it's possible that we build a really secure application, but let us say someone leaks out the password, and then we're like, no matter how good the password is, your security is not good enough. So the same way that your security is only as good as how we develop it. So I'll just show a quick demo since you asked about it. So I am just showing you a project that I was working on earlier. So give it a few seconds to load. In the meantime, so JWT.io is a place which you can learn all about JWT, decode them. It is maintained by Auth0, but it is free and open for everyone. So this is a sample JWT. The decoding function looks like. One of the most important things that people have to realize is the fact that a JWT is not secret. Anyone can read what a JWT has. A JWT, the advantage that JWT by default has the fact that it is resistant to tamper. So if I tamper something, you can actually know it's tampered. So it is like a sealed ID card. Anyone can see what the content of the ID card is, but if the seal is tampered, you can know it. So that is how JWT essentially work like. So JWT by default, so you should never be storing passwords in JWT because expecting it to be secure. JWT is just a way to know when things are tampered. You can encrypt the JWT, it is possible, but the usual way in which JWTs are used are unencrypted. The content can be viewed by anyone. So that is something that you have to realize. So coming to something about JWT, using JWT by default does not make anything secure. This is a application which I am just showing some small parts because I have implemented Auth0 over here. So before verifying a JWT, you have to make sure that you trust the limited aspects of the JWT that you are receiving. So coming to the index.js file that we had over here, it is a backend. from which I'm decoding header. Okay? So an example that we see over here. Once again, decode token from header. Nothing goes well in live demos. Yeah. The first thing that you can see over here is the fact that the first thing that you have to keep in mind is that you have to first assert the token you're getting is essentially the bearer token, because bearer token is where the JWT is supposed to come. You do not just take any token that you get in the header and directly assume it to be JWT. You have to first assert it starts with the bearer, and then you take the remaining parts out of it. The first thing, you do not assume any header to be a JWT based token. And then this is a package provided, open source package provided by Auth0, but there are packages out there. You can even use the basic Node.js crypto package if you know how it works. So this part is the part that I am telling that the JWT should be looking like. I know that the JWT should be of RS-256 algorithm. If you do not put this, it's possible that someone sends a JWT with no authentication. They created a JWT which has got no authentication, and you just allowed it to pass because you did not assert the expected algorithm was the algorithm that you expected it to be. And I'm also asserting that the audience, the issuer, are the ones that are expecting it to be. Just because a JWT has got a user info, it is not tampered with, does not mean that it is intended for your application. So that is something that you have to keep in mind. Using JWT by default does not make your application secure. You have to make sure that you are asserting as much known information about your JWT before trying to actually use it. Because this is one of the biggest vulnerabilities that folks have. That they will not check the algorithms, and if you do not check the algorithm, someone can pass something which an algorithm has none. None means there is no signature, and then it essentially means that they're able to. So that is something that you have to keep track of. Yeah. So that's the point. You are only as secure as how you develop it. So let us say that even if you have got the world-class security, and as I mentioned, you have got a client secret. If you expose it on the client side, then essentially you are doomed. But since Auth0 is an enterprise platform, so if you do things like you commit a client secret or things to GitHub or GitLab or any source control, they will alert you, they'll mail you. They have got their own internal detection systems, so which do things like suspicious IP throttling, bot detection. This is part of the paid plan, which is really useful for folks who are running on enterprise. That let us say that you are running something along the lines of a large corporation, and you won't know if one of our employees is using a password which is part of a global breach. So Auth0 can directly intimate if the user's password is part of the global breach. And trust me, this does not use stored passwords. All of this is possible without storing the passwords. So your data is completely secure. Even Auth0 does not have access to your user's password. All of this is possible using internal mathematics, crypto, and hashing. Auth0 has no point, even if you use all the features, will ever have access to your internal passwords or your data. So that is something that you can always be trusting Auth0 with. Yes. So the first thing, so one of the basic problems that happens with tokens is the fact that So one of the things that you have to understand is the fact that if your API if your front end is able to do something, then a bot can do it, because that's what you have to have in your mind first. If your front end can do it, a bot can do it. So the question that comes is that if your front end can make an API call to your secure resource, what is preventing a bot from doing it? Because even that is possible. Okay. So the way that it works is that we have got something along the lines of short-lived tokens and refresh tokens. So the tokens that you have on the front end are short-lived tokens. Okay. So even if they're able to use it at max 1 or 2, it depends on the kind of security you want. You can have short-lived tokens along the lines of 1 hour. You can have short-lived tokens on the lines of 1 day. It depends on the kind of security you want for the application. So if you're building something mission critical, you should have short-lived tokens and you have refresh tokens. So the question that comes is that what if they steal the refresh token? Because they can steal the token, they can steal the refresh token as well. So the refresh tokens are always kept in the, it's maintained in the database. Okay. So anytime a refresh token is reused, the entire user is logged out from entire application that the user is using. So let us say that I have got refresh token A and bot also got access to refresh token A. So let us say that somehow the bot used it before me. The bot used the refresh token A, it got a new refresh token. I did not know the bot used it because I would never know. I go ahead to reuse my refresh token, it alerts the entire system, and then all the credentials that I've ever stored, all of them get logged out. The only way for me to restart is by actually doing the login once again. So the moment a refresh token gets reused, it triggers the system and it does log out everywhere. So that is essentially one of the ways in which security is established to make sure that we have short-lived tokens and use refresh token rotation, and we keep track of the refresh tokens that are ever used. And even if you use a refresh token that is issued like long back ago, it is always kept in database. The moment a refresh token is reused anywhere, it means a breach had happened and logout happens in the entire system.
Yeah, it was really great to tell about Auth0 and how it can help easily. And we can manage the logs as well, right, in Auth0. So it is very simple and very easy. And thanks for this session.
Just one thing that I wanted to mention, which I did not mention earlier, is the fact that Auth0 is sponsoring MLH hackathons. If you're participating in MLH hackathons, which are like open for everyone, and you build something on top of Auth0, you get some Auth0 swags, and there are some prizes. I'm not sure of the exact details of the prizes, but Auth0 is an MLH partner, and you get prizes for building things on top of MLH, on top of Auth0 at MLH hackathons. So if you're trying to build something at hackathons, which are an amazing place to start things off with, feel free to try them out. And if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to me. You can place them out over here.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much about me. Thanks everyone for the amazing session. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask, because this is just the beginning of the authentication authorization journey. And yeah, we learn every day.